The woman said to Jesus, "Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." And the woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have well said, I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said, "I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am." At this point his disciples came, and they marvelled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" The woman then left her water pot, and went her way into the city, and said to the men, "Come, see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" Then they went out of the city and came to him. In the meantime the disciples urged him, saying, "Rabbi, eat." But he said to them, "I have had food of which you do not know." Therefore the disciples said to one another, "Has anyone brought him anything to eat?" My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we continue reading in John chapter 4. We read verses 10 to 33. It's early in the ministry of Jesus. Until his public debut as a preacher, he had displayed no tendencies that made people think he might be the Messiah. He hadn't played at being Messiah all his young life, so those who knew him were somewhat surprised that he took this path. He had been baptized by John the Baptist. He had spent the 7 weeks in the wilderness. He had recovered from that, and at the beginning of the year he had recruited 6 disciples, and within 10 days was in Jerusalem performing signs, making such an impression that even the chief teacher of the Jews, Nicodemus, had come to him one evening, impressed with Jesus' signs, to understand where he was coming from, knowing that he must be a teacher come from God. Well, Jesus explained that he was from above, that he had come to reveal heavenly things to men, that those who believed in him would have everlasting life. After that short period of time in Jerusalem, he went south and ministered in various parts of Judea, and in that period of time huge numbers of people believed in him and were baptized by Jesus' disciples. But at this time he didn't have time to expound his teaching, but it was really igniting a messianic movement, so much so that the Pharisees, who'd taken notice of John the Baptist, were taking even more notice of Jesus and those who are following him. So when Jesus learned that, he left all those disciples behind in Judea and travelled north, deliberately choosing to go through Samaritan territory when he could have avoided it, as indeed most Jews did. And coming to the ancient city of Sychar, or Shechem, where Abraham and Jacob had dwelt, Jacob had dug a well there which was still functioning, and having walked a long way on a hot day, he's weary in the evening and sits down by the well while the disciples go into town to fetch some food. A woman from the city comes out. he asks her for a drink. She's surprised because he's obviously a Jew, and he's breaking cultural boundaries by speaking to a woman he does not know. And she expresses her surprise. How is it, you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? But Jesus said, if you knew the gift of God, and he who speaks to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. In other words, he basically says, you don't know who I am. And she says, well, you don't have anything to draw water with. Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well, who drank from it himself? And Jesus said, but this water you get thirsty again. The water that I will give gives everlasting life. So the woman says, well, yeah, I want that water, so then I won't have to come and draw water at this well. She at last asks Jesus a question. They are in conversation. Now Jesus says, well, go and ask your husband to come here. And she says, I have no husband. We now find that her married life is a real mess. Jesus says, that's right. You have well said, I have no husband. You have had 5 husbands. We wonder what's happened. Are they dead, or have they just all left her because she's so impossible to live with? Who knows? She does have a man in her life, though, who is not her husband. Does that mean he's somebody else's husband? It's the kind of mess that we find in life today. I know women who have children from multiple fathers. They enter into a relationship, but it blows up on them. The man leaves, and she is distressed. But for Jesus to know this when he's never met her before and is not a local, she says, I guess you must be a prophet. And she changes the subject away from herself to a religious theme. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain. Now this suggests that although she is not of the tribe of Judah, she is a descendant of Israel, one of the 10 tribes. For the Samaritans were a mixed group of people. No doubt there were some of the original 10 tribes living in Samaria, as well as those that were brought in by the Assyrians from other places, 600 years previous. These people identified back to Jacob, although they were not walking in the ways of God. And they revered Jacob, who had established the nation, the head of the 12 tribes. So she brings up the argument that exists between Judah and Ephraim. We worship here, you worship there. But this is an older place than Jerusalem. Of course, that's not quite true, because Abraham worshipped God in both places. And Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High God, was at Jerusalem. In any case, when she raises that issue, Jesus says, well, the time's coming when the place will not matter, because indeed Jerusalem will be destroyed, and Shechem will not be the place. You don't know the one that you worship. The Jews, that is, the descendants of Judah, have a relationship of some sorts with the living God because salvation is of the Jews. God has preserved these people that the Messiah might come through them. But we're in a transition time, and the time is coming when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, because that's what the Father is seeking. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Well, this is too much for the woman. She said, well, when the Messiah comes, he'll sort it all out. And Jesus' response is, I am. Here is Jesus' first public declaration that he is the Messiah to a Samaritan woman who has history, but it's pretty vague, whose life is a mess. She recognizes that he is a prophet. Now he declares to her, he is the Messiah. She immediately goes back into town and tells the men of the city, come, see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?